Welcome to the Veritas Forum, engaging university students and faculty in discussions about life's hardest questions and the relevance of Jesus Christ to all of life.
It is my pleasure to be here with you today. I just drove up from Philadelphia, and I had no idea how far north you guys are. This is my first visit to Eastman, and I'm stunned. But it's a lovely town so far, what I've seen of it. So I look forward to learning more about you and your experience here, and to share a bit of my own journey with you. But to share it through the lens of perhaps one of the most influential composers in the history of Western music, which is, of course, Beethoven. Let me start off by saying that I trained as a pianist ever since I was young, but one of the things that I've really come to realize as my purpose is to understand the life and motivation of each composer as they approach music. Because music, of course, is an expression of one's thoughts, but there is a wealth, a repository of spiritual, emotional, physical, intellectual information that is all being channeled through what we call the language of music. And undoubtedly, music is probably the most powerful language that exists, and that's why it transcends cultural divisions, transcends time. And so this ability to transcend time is what I find so fascinating. Because what I'm about to tell you about Beethoven is in many ways relevant to my own experience as a musician. I'm not saying at all that I'm in the caliber of a Beethoven, hardly. I'd be thrilled to even carry his slippers. But what I am saying is that the human experience, regardless of time, regardless of socioeconomics, regardless of the continent you live in, is still the same. There's a certain quest that we all experience. So let me dive in first by talking about the quest that Beethoven experienced, in large part due to personal crisis. Okay? So as you know, Beethoven lived, does anyone know Beethoven's dates off the bat? I'm going to test you. Look, this is a privilege for me to be speaking to an informed audience. You guys are musicians. I just did this a couple months back in Juilliard. And I was asking him about German augmented sixth chords and all kinds of things. I'm going to do the same with you guys. Okay? But anyways, does anyone know his dates? 1770 to 1827. Now, why am I asking this question? Because you have to understand the context of his time is hugely relevant to this conversation. Beethoven is, in many ways, an Enlightenment composer. And the Enlightenment was so much about the importance of reason, okay, as a primary force for understanding life, for understanding why, purpose, okay, and pursuit. Now, given that, I find what Beethoven communicates so well, and that is his longing for peace and redemption, to be fascinating in the context of his time. Okay? He was very much an intellectual, a musical intellectual, not gifted in anything else other than music. Okay? He was not exceptional in writing. He was not exceptional in his understanding of history or art, nothing, just music. He was a single-minded channel composer. Now know this, like all of us, Beethoven wanted to understand his purpose in life. Why am I here? And I will tell you that when he was very young, in his years in Bonn, for example, previous to moving to Vienna, he was not really challenged to pursue that question very hard. However, when he was in his early 20s, he moved to Vienna, which was at that point the cultural capital of Europe. You understand, great writers, thinkers, musicians, composers, they were all centered there. And Beethoven felt the profound pressure to become the next Mozart or Haydn. Okay, he was in that lineage of the first Viennese school. And when he arrived in Vienna, many people celebrated his talent. He was definitely seen as the next great genius who would own Viennese culture. Now, juxtapose that with the personal reality that he was losing his hearing So we know for sure in 1802 when he wrote the Heiligenstadt Testament, and Heiligenstadt is sort of a suburban, rural area outside of Vienna, where Beethoven would retreat to get away from the urban chaos of then late 18th century Vienna. And he loved to be in the context of nature. And in Heiligenstadt, he revealed for all the world to understand his profound crisis, personal crisis that he was experiencing at such a young age. Okay? 1802 makes him about 32 years old, right? The onset of deafness. And in this testament, he wrote to his brothers, and he wanted them to find out about his struggles after he died. And let me just read an excerpt to you. Okay? This is 1802. What a humiliation when one stood beside me and heard a flute in the distance, and I heard nothing. Or someone heard the shepherd singing, and again, I heard nothing. Such incidents brought me to the verge of despair. But little more, and I would have put an end to my life. Only art it was that withheld me. It seemed impossible to leave the world until I had produced all that I felt called upon to produce. And so I endured this wretched existence, truly wretched, an excitable body, which a sudden change can throw from the best into the worst state. So Beethoven was nearly suicidal, okay? And then if you know anything about his middle period of composition, what you do, starting with the Eroica Symphony, right? You all know. Right? That the Eroica was really an evocation of heroism. At first devoted or dedicated to Napoleon Bonaparte, he ripped up the dedication, and really it became a personal narrative about his own heroic struggle with the crisis or challenges that were very personal to him. Okay? So there's a narrative element to the Eroica Symphony. Now, I brought up the key of E flat major, right? Other pieces in the key of E flat, the Emperor Concerto. Right? You guys know? What's the key of C minor? What's this? What would you say that's an evocation of? If not heroism, it is what? Someone said something. Despair. Tragedy, right? Anxiety and tragedy. The first piece I'm going to talk to you about is actually the Pathetique Sonata. And that is in the key of C minor, tragic key, all right? So, and what he reveals here is a very personal quest for peace. It is not as explicit as the second piece I'm going to actually talk to you about, which is from his late phase. But what I want you to see here is the personal narrative focus that becomes very clear in his music, particularly from the early part of his middle phase to his late phase, okay? So the key of C minor, tragic key. You all know this piece, which is why I bring it up. It's everyone's perhaps top 10, on the top 10 list of everyone's listening list, right? Now this is 1798 to 99. He was already detecting loss of hearing. So understand it was very real to him. typically speaking, the second movement would be in a related key, right? What are possible keys for a second movement if the piece is situated in C minor? E flat major, someone said, right? Yeah. What was another key? G, okay. So you're talking about a dominant relationship, maybe relative major relationship. The key he chose was actually related by thirds. Okay? It's A flat major. Now, if C minor is the key of tragedy, A flat major is actually the key of peace for him. There's a lot of symbolic meaning to the keys that he chooses. So whenever you play Beethoven, always be thinking, put on those different hats in terms of your mindset, of the emotional disposition he was trying to portray. Now, in the key of A flat major, he writes this absolutely stunning melody, which Carl Haas, who used to be a radio announcer and used to talk about classical music, used to use in the beginning of his show. You might have heard this. That music? Right? It's so gorgeous, right? Never mind the playing. All right? So this theme in A flat major has something quite interesting to it. The construction of fourths. First, the whole step. You hear that fourth? And then listen to the bass line. Fourth. Fourth. Just nudge that away in your head. Okay? So key of A flat major. The final key of this movement is set back in the key of C minor. And it's in the sonata rondo form. A, B, A, C, A, B prime, A, coda. Okay? Do you guys know the difference between rondo and sonata rondo form? Kind of, sort of. How do you know for sure it's a sonata rondo form and not just a rondo? Because A, B, A, C, A, B, A could be a rondo, couldn't it? The A theme, which is the rondo theme. Rondo in Italian means coming around and around and around, almost like a refrain. And it creates cohesion, it binds the piece together. So A, then contrasting section B, then A comes back again, then contrasting section C, A comes back again, then contrasting section B prime, and then back to A. All right? The A theme, so I didn't even answer the question. So anyone know? Secondary theme, excellent. So the B section, in this case, happens in the key of E flat. So here's the C, the A theme. Good notice. And now the E flat theme, the B theme is B flat. Nevertheless, it's the relative key. When the B section comes back, B prime, what key is it going to be in? C minor. And the fact that it was tonicized makes this a sonata rondo form, almost like the return of the key in the recap. Do you understand that, the parallels? Okay. I'm bringing this up only because it's important for my points to come upon this later. Okay, so I'm not just testing you out. Cool. All right. So here we have the C minor theme, which I've played for you, and the secondary theme. The C section brings back an interesting key. We've had C minor, E flat major, we come back to C minor. What key do you think is going to show up? If we want real contrast, remember the key of C minor is tragedy. What is the polar, anxiety, tragedy, angst? What is the polar opposite of that? It is B flat. A flat, that's right, from the second movement. And so the C section goes like this. down so low is an oddity, isn't it, for the second? Well, to reference that, not only in key, but in fourths, he positions the C section in exactly the same register. Okay? Now, after that C section, what's going to come back again? 572. Oh, we can't escape the truth of our existence, which is one of anxiety, right? And angst, unsettledness. We then have the B prime section, secondary theme, tonicized, C major, right? It's all in C major. And then finally, we get the final A statement. Now, what happens in the coda? We have this. Now, you'd think, oh, let's just close it off in C minor, right? He's in a perfect position to do that. Does anyone know what's happened harmonically? Where did he go? 5 of A flat through the Neapolitan, right? Which is D flat, right? This is this word. And then the 5/7. And then what does he bring in? Same tonal location. E flat is the dominant of A flat. He moves it up 1 octave. But we're like, oh my goodness, is this piece finally going to transcend tragedy? No. That's what he does to the A flat. Augmented German 6 chord. So he went from A flat major. What did he add? A flat, C, E flat. He added a F sharp. Perfect for the spelling. Thank you, friends. Augmented German 6 chord. Up in the upper registers. Resolves to 164, which is C minor. And then he slams the door shut on peace. Right? That's it. Forget it. I don't pursue this anymore. Right? Now, isn't that stunning? I feel like this narrative connection of the second and third movements, once understood through the juxtaposition of keys, is profound, right? It even has an impact on how you play the piece. Now I'm going to fast forward. I'm actually going to fast forward to the late sonata, because I want you to understand something profound has happened to this man. Again, there are so many sirens here. What's all the activity? Do you guys is that okay. So, wrong volume. So I'm going to move now to Opus 110. Okay? That's his penultimate sonata. Anybody know what penultimate means? Second to last. Absolutely right. Now, we've talked about tragedy and angst, personal suffering, right? And the struggle for peace. And glimpses of it. Rare, but nevertheless glimpses of peace through A flat major. Tragedy in C minor, peace in A flat major. And the sort of the way that these keys interact, right? He's telling us a story. Now, the story in Opus 110 becomes exceedingly more explicit. And the sonata number 31 is actually cast in A flat major. Isn't that interesting? This is the opening theme to the first movement. turning statements, right, in this great key? Well, the first movement is just an introduction. And in the same way that Beethoven bound the second and third movements through key relationships, we're going to see a much more direct connectivity of movements in Opus 110. What do I mean by that? The second movement will go right into the third movement without stopping. Okay? That was a typical Beethovenian device, and we started seeing that in his middle period, something he loved to do. Why? Because he loves to set up polar opposites, juxtapositions of black and white. Second movement, third movement, right? Together. And that is the power he is harnessing in his music to express truths or relevances of our existence as humans. Now, the second theme of this first movement, I just played. What intervals you hear? Where are those intervals? Sounds vaguely familiar, doesn't it? Okay, let's just notch that away. Climbing fourths, first theme. This is the secondary theme. Now, some musicologists may not agree with this, but this is my theory. The secondary theme has to be in the dominant, right? This is a major key. Okay? So the dominant of A flat is going to be E flat. Okay. Don't give me B. Who said it? All right. So this is what we get. Beethoven had been suffering bouts with jaundice, he had other infectious illnesses, okay, and he was in very poor health. By 1815, you should know, he was pretty much in isolation. And he composed largely for an audience of connoisseurs, okay. Those days of the Eroica variation, the Eroica Symphony and the C minor Symphony and the Waldstein Sonata and the Appassionata Sonata and the Beethoven Concerto for violin, etc. Those days of energy and charge and hopefulness that had emerged from his 1802 statement of despair, right? His desire to climb out of tragedy into heroism is no longer the case in this late phase. So whatever energy he brought to his compositions in the middle period are now being profoundly challenged by a different desire, and that is for the transcendent. Okay? Beethoven is probably most popular, or most best known, I should say, for his middle era works with the vast public, wouldn't you say? It's the late works that people find very difficult to access, and there's a reason why. It becomes exceedingly esoteric. Look, if you're composing in a world of complete silence where there's no auditory input, and you can't communicate with people except for writing on a slate, and you're literally putting your head on the piano to just feel some vibrations from the instrument, you become socially removed. You're removed from reality, removed from relationship, and so he withdraws into this realm of silence. And all he has to live with are basically his own thoughts. You think about that. How ironic. Of all tragedies, of all crises, personal crises to have, what does he have? One of the greatest composers of all time. He loses his hearing. Isn't that ironic? But I think it's nobility, the vulnerability, the weaknesses that mark and define us as human beings on Earth, our physical existence on Earth. Now, I'm hoping that I can present to you a open and shut case of why he is reaching for the transcendent through the next two movements, okay? We'll see how well I do this, all right? So, the second movement has two very vernacular themes in it. The first theme is, our cat had kittens. Unser Katze gehabt. I'm playing it slowly just to show you that that theme reflects the textual rhythm, the spoken rhythm of the text, right? Unser Katze gehabt. And then it's followed by this. Right? Kind of a rude and abrupt, forget it! That's a ridiculous statement, all right, to follow that. And the second theme that he introduces is this one. I'm a Slav, you're a Slav. How do you like that? After starting off this whole sonata with what seemed to be such an ethereal, transcendent piece, he interrupts that essay with a second movement that is crass, in some ways profane through the classical tradition, right? Drawing upon two very coarse, rough, common-a-day tunes. But know this, it's actually born out of personal experience. So the I'm a Slav, you're a Slav tune actually is born out of personal experience. So one night, Beethoven is walking on the streets of Vienna. He decides to kind of peer through the window of a Viennese aristocrat, nobleman. And he's kind of looking to see how people are, what kind of furniture, wow, nice digs. And then a policeman comes up and says, what are you doing? He said, oh, you know, I'm just walking. He says, who are you? And he says, I'm Beethoven. Beethoven, like even, you know, the police, they knew who Beethoven was. Everyone knew who Beethoven was. You're not Beethoven, you're a Slav. Okay, so Beethoven was personally insulted. That is all recorded by Alexander Thayer, you know, the 19th century biographer, perhaps the defining biographer for Beethoven. All right, so that anecdote, that experience is actually recorded in that biography. So Beethoven uses that tune, I'm a Slav, you're a Slav, because it actually was born out of personal experience. Now there has to be an even greater purpose for that theme. And that purpose will come up in just a second. So let me play for you, sitting down, these first two themes as they close the movement. And then I'm going to segue right into the third movement. Remember I told you it connects movements? If the second movement is profane, what would you surmise the third movement is going to be? Remember I told you he loves to juxtapose opposites, polar opposites. Sublime, okay. And the other elegant, all right. How about more explicitly speaking? If there's symbolism in this, if the profanity of the second movement is to reflect our condition as humans, what explicit opposite could be used?
Sacred or spiritual?
Exactly, the spiritual or the transcendent. And what symbolically could I use as a composer to convey that? Angels and God, wonderful. But let me talk about the symbols, in musically speaking, all right? Now, let me backtrack just a second to give you a backdrop. Do you know the Missa Solemnis? The solemn mass, perhaps the greatest mass ever written, okay? Beethoven was focusing on the Missa Solemnis right before he decided to write the last three piano sonatas. This 109, this 110, this 111. Okay, so this is the middle one. So in his mind, he's thinking about recitative, aria, and fugue. These are the symbolic devices of sacred music, right? As found in oratorios, for example, masses, right? That's the tradition. Now, recitative is supposed to demonstrate to you spoken text, isn't it? Musical way of moving spoken text. And the aria is often commentary on that spoken text. What is the fugue? Anyone know? What does the fugue symbolize? You have to understand this was common day knowledge in Beethoven's era. What would the fugue symbolize? Anyone want to hazard a guess? Congregation. The fugue was meant to represent God's moral and universal order. Why? It's incredibly rigorous, right? It is dominated by craft, isn't it? I mean, all composers try to demonstrate their worth by writing a fugue. You had to show you were worth. Your weight as a composer was demonstrated through that medium, okay? Not only that, it's hard to do, isn't it? Each voice chasing each other, and harmonically it's got to work out, and you've got to be able to finish the theme in each voice as they chase each other. This complex weave of voices is meant to symbolize universal order. I mean, think of the solar system, right? Think of nature, all this is meant to symbolize God's universal order and moral order, okay? So think about those three symbols. As I play the end of the second movement and segue right into the sacredness of the third movement. Once I start the third movement, I want you to shout out which of these three he's using. Recitative, aria, or fugue. Got it? You got your assignment? Yes, okay. Great. Here's the end of the second movement. I'll start from the Anaslav first. louder or slower? First theme of the first word. Exactly right. Climbing fourths, interlocking. So you see that second word? Now why am I bringing this up? Listen to the aria. What is that? Sixth. Note the efficiency, the economy of this composition. It's staggering, isn't it? Beautifully crafted. This is just the beginning. Wait till you see the power of this thing. So, the aria comes along, and it's supposed to be incredibly mournful, right? It's so challenging to play. How many pianists are here? Any pianists? Yeah. You know what I'm talking about, right? Horrendously difficult. Now, after this aria, let me just play the closing. The emotional tragedy of the situation. Now, you're not fully aware of what that tragedy is. You will be in just a second. Okay. Now, we have this fugue in A flat, and this is how it closes. We're still in the key of A flat. Thank you, Beethoven, for some stability. Okay. This is what happens. sinking a half step from A flat to G. All right? So what is he pulling on this? Okay, and this time the aria says, ermatet, come, pale, weakened, perdendo le forze dolente. Watch out, we combine German and Italian. He's a double whammy. He's trying to, don't get it wrong. I'm going to be as specific as I can be. Perdendo la forze means losing force. Dolente, right? Mournful, sorrowful. And the rhythms convey that. Listen to the apostatories. Fugue, right? Because again, that order has to be restored. This emotional state has dropped to an even more tragic one, right? And look how he does this. Stunning, right? The end of the aria. What does he bring back? He redeems the Slav in the context of sacred music symbols. He brings the Slav back. And guess what? When the Slav emerges, it becomes triumphant. And the fugue theme returns now, absolutely victorious. In the conclusion, there's no challenge to the restoration of A flat major, the key of peace, and it dominates. It powerfully is restored and captured in the end. So let me play from this moment, this recitation of I'm not Slav, you're Slav, through to the coda to the end. Okay? And you can see how triumphant this is. let's not lose sight of the more important message. Recitative, aria, lament, right? Restoration through the fugue theme, which is God's moral and universal order. That wasn't enough. The music falls again to a lower emotional point through aria again. Fugue comes back, but this time, what? The redemptive moment. The Slav is brought back in the context of this piece, and then the fugue theme comes in triumphant, and peace is proclaimed, restored, solidified, right, and won by the end of this movement. Isn't that something? Isn't that writing powerful? Isn't the symbolism incredibly powerful? Now, this is rooted in personal experience and quest. Understand that. What we saw in the Pathetique Sonata was a glimpse of the very specific spiritual question Beethoven was asking even for himself. This is not an intellectual exercise, my friends. If it were, it wouldn't be so powerful. Okay? He has personal investment in this. Know this, that Beethoven himself longed to know his maker. Even from the point of realizing that he was growing deaf, he longed to know who God was. It so happened that he came in a political time where the church and society were in a state of great upheaval, right? But nevertheless, he pursued it. In the midst of his illness, you should know, there was a moment where he was thought to be on the throes of death. And there was lightning and thunder, and he raised his fist. And he went to a physician, okay? The physician was going to help him. He was suffering miserably. And the doctor couldn't help him. No amount of human intervention could solve his fundamental, flawed physical state. And then he said, there's only one doctor, one physician who can cure me. And his name is Wonderful. And he stopped. Anyone know what that is reference to? In Handel's Messiah, right? Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Prince of Peace. You see, he had been studying, poring over Handel's Messiah. So that no wonder he understood the craft of oratorio, right? The symbolic techniques embedded in sacred music through the use of recitative aria and fugue. All right, so that was one of his last statements. Now, you see, Beethoven found his purposefulness in bringing his talent to fruition, taking it as far as he could go. And what prompted him was this fear that he would never be able to realize the greatness that he knew that was within him. I will tell you that his greatness would have been far shortchanged had he not been looking upward, if his desire wasn't for something more transcendent, something that transcended himself in his pained existence. Suffering, in other words, induced him, right, his ability to look upward. If one doesn't suffer, one doesn't have need beyond oneself. Isn't that true? We can all make our existences pretty comfortable, especially in this modern age. Now, as I segue to my own story, which will be much briefer, because I have not written any compositions, I just tell you through anecdotes and experience my own story. I will tell you that my own pursuit, though not nearly as interesting, not nearly as dramatic, has also been about the pursuit of purpose. Just like Beethoven, what is the purpose of my talent? I don't know if you guys feel this way, but do you ever ask yourself, why am I here? What am I doing in this practice room at 12 at night, right? No promise of a job, no friends, no money, nothing, right? No guarantee of a future, but yet I keep going and returning to that practice room daily. Why am I here? That's the question, right? So this is my story. When I was a very young kid, I was 7 years old, when my parents discovered that I should be taking piano lessons. I mean, I was the kind of kid who just, threw her books on the doorstep and ran out to play. That was my thing. I loved playing with neighborhood friends. But I could play a lot of things by ear, and I would do that often in church. Okay, so we were attending church, but I didn't necessarily have a personal faith. When I was 9, however, I saw Anna Maria Veritas, who was a child prodigy, who now lives in Germany. She's middle-aged now. She was playing a Haydn D major piano concerto with the Boston Pops. And I watched this on TV, and I thought, hot dog, how can she play like this? I mean, I was thrilled that I could play heart and soul, you know, chopsticks, variations on chopsticks. I thought that was big, right? And then I thought, no way. There's this saying in Chinese culture that if you can walk, there's someone who can run. If you can run, there's someone who can fly. You know, you understand? That really came upon me that night as I watched her on PBS playing with the Boston Pops. She played beautifully, and from that day on, literally to the day that I watched that televised performance, I practiced 2 and 3 hours a day. My parents were like, what is going on here? And I said, you know what, if she can do that, I gotta see if I can do that too. I mean, I really had almost like an anxious feeling that, can I rise to that level? Would I be able to make something of this music-making thing? Well, by the time I was 12, I was deep into it, practicing 3-4 hours a day, and my parents were scared to death. They're like, what kind of choices are you? I'm like, I want to be the next Vladimir Horowitz, was my declaration at 12. Right? But anyways, okay. Just a cute kid at that point saying this, and my dad's like, oh no. Let's have a conversation with her about a 6-year pre-medical school program. About this kind of thinking, right? Okay, so we had many breakfast table conversations about my future. But you know, it's far more about my life's purpose than it was about a job or glory or anything else. You see, when I was 12, for some odd reason, and I do feel this was planted by God, I had a desire to live an ideal life. In other words, to be purified by living an artistic existence that was almost monastic. Like, by focusing purely on my music, I would transcend the doldrums of adolescence. Okay? That was my thinking. How bizarre. My dad said, okay. But I really do feel like this was God's way of planting seeds in my heart so that I would look upward. Well, when I was 12, 13 years old, I accepted Jesus as my personal Savior because I saw it as a very natural segue. See, this ideal pursuit of music in my mind wasn't enough. I thought, wait a minute, it's just about me. So I'm also bound by my limitations. I can only go so far. You know, I know what I'm made of. I know my strengths, but I also am very much aware of my own weaknesses and fallibility. But as soon as I realized, you know, the gospel was shared with me that God loves me unconditionally. And his act of grace of sending Christ to die on the cross was a gift to me. That I didn't have to earn anybody's acceptance. I definitely didn't need to earn God's acceptance. He had given it to me, okay, as a gift. So I came to that profound realization as an early teen. Now that was tested. Trust me, it always is, isn't it? This world is surrounded by trials and situations that make us doubt and consider. I played, right by the time I was 12, I was playing with like the Baltimore Symphony and, you know, taking on some pretty serious gigs. And when I was 16 years old, I remember playing through all these competitions and I kept losing. And I was like, what's going on? Wait a minute. I thought, now that I'm a child of God, my purpose is to say, look at this talent. I'm bringing glory to God. It should be as simple as that. It was not that simple. It's about God's craftsmanship of our own souls. And the realization that my gift is actually his, given by him, right? And that true glory for God is not necessarily on how well I play, but who I am inside, right? So when I was 16 years old, I remember so distinctly crouching by my little black Kanabi grand piano, okay? And praying this prayer. I said, Lord, I am so humiliated by defeat after defeat. You know I've practiced my head off. I've done my best. And I thought this was about bringing you glory. But obviously your glory is not achieved by me winning awards. That's just one aspect of it, but that's not the point of this. So I said, if you are glorified in my defeat, so be it. But my desire is to say, here's my talent, do with it as you will. Whatever that means, do with it as you will. So at at 16, I remember distinctly giving up that over my talent. That doesn't mean I didn't practice. I still practiced like a dog, okay? I went at it fiercely. But I also knew that my ego, which was so intimately wrapped up with my success in music, had to somehow be shaped in order to produce something far greater, all right? Now, when I got to college, when I got to Harvard, you know, I kind of was at the state where I thought, hey, I'm at Harvard, and I play pretty well. And in Harvard, there are not many pianists, so it's very easy to delude yourself that you're somehow, you know, the cat's meow, right? So I'm thinking, wow, I really guys, I can play anything, play Rachmaninoff concertos, you know, I'm pretty good. And all of a sudden, I get this mentor, Louise Valskirchen, who was a student of Nadia Boulanger, okay, in Paris. Okay, talk about a piece of humble pie coming out. She hears me play, and she says, Mia, and this was printed in a newspaper, okay? I'm the Harvard Independent. I was horrified, okay? So there was this article done about my work as a pianist, and then they interviewed Louise Valskirchen of all things, and I was like, oh no. And what does she say? Mia can play anything, but she has no idea what she's playing. Something to that effect. I am sort of paraphrasing what she said. Can I tell you, that induced a crisis of spirit, because I thought, wait a minute, my purpose is music, I'm here to play well, I'm here to be a smart musician, but what I didn't realize was at that point God was planting a seed in me. See, what I just demonstrated to you right now, talking about the music, do you know how that pursuit of understanding started? It started with her comment. Do you understand? You can play anything, but you don't understand what you're playing. And that was such a shock to my system. I decided, I don't care what it takes, I'm going to have to figure this out. And my professors were not much help, I'll tell you. They were talking about 16th century French watermarks in the scores, okay? Wait a minute, I don't get this. You know, some arcane research in this area, a little bit of this, you know, on this tone poem there, and then a Bach fugue here. I just have no understanding. When I graduated from Harvard, I went through Yale, and I got to the DMA program at Juilliard, I was even more sorely tested. Because then I was in a sea full of pianists who were playing day and night, and who could play circles around me. I knew it, right? You know, those funny legends of playing, say, like, you know, Opus 10 #1, Chopin Etude, you play at one tempo, and then next door the next person plays it just 2 metronome ticks faster than you, right? You know, that kind of stuff is going on all the time. So you're constantly questioning, like, oh, am I doing the right thing? Am I in music for the right reason? Did I really make the right decision? And then I was reminded about my commitment. What I had prayed when I was 16 years old. I had said, Lord, I give this up to you. Meanwhile, my friends from Harvard were working on Wall Street and making beautiful figure, a salary, right? Figure of six-figure salary. Let me get my words straight here. A beautiful salary, okay? I wasn't making a thing, no prospects of a job, nothing, okay? And I was in the pits of doubt and despair. But nevertheless, I did say, Lord, I know this is not some odd coincidence that I'm here at Juilliard. And though it's hard, and though I'm slogging away, and I don't still fully understand my purpose here, you have called me to this, and it just happened to be available. So I finished my job at Juilliard, and I got my first teaching position at Wharton College, which is this itty-bitty little college, liberal arts college north of Boston. And I taught there for 20 years. And you know what one of the greatest gifts was of that job? I had a boss who said, Mia, what would you like to teach? You can teach anything you like. Okay? Very charitable kind. And one year he said, our musicologist is leaving. Would you like to take part of the history studies? I was like, are you kidding? I have 4 children. Oh no, 3 kids and 1 on the way. Really? And he said, I think you should consider it. So I thought, oh, I couldn't believe it. So I was slogging long nights, staying up till 1 in the morning. I was this pregnant, and I was teaching my first round of history courses. And I could tell the kids were like, you know, kind of like, did she say what she just said? Okay. Slightly dubious. no, really? Okay. So I took on theory, all right? And through the years, over many years, what happened was, all of a sudden, my understanding of the piano as a player started to come together with my understanding of the craft. Do you understand? You see where this came from? And one day, it was like eureka moment. I was like, God, that moment when Louise Voskirchen cast the most insulting statement I could ever anticipate, and that is that I knew nothing about what I was playing, was the very seed that prompted me on this journey, this pursuit. Even though I want, like Jews in the desert, right? Wander like this sometimes. But nevertheless, you got me there. And so, how interesting when all of a sudden, I've only been teaching at Curtis for 1 year. My husband says, guess what? I have an opportunity to take on a job in the Philadelphia area. And I was like, what? I'm a tenured full professor at Ward College, and I love my job, and I love my students, and really? And then he says, let's pray about this. Guess what? 3 weeks after that news, I get an email. I had contacted a friend saying we're considering Philadelphia. It turns out she sent my bio to some people at Curtis. Okay? And I get a call. Hi, I'd like to talk about what you've been teaching at Ward College. How random is that? Isn't that crazy random? And then he says, we are launching a new initiative to bridge performance and knowledge. What you've been teaching is exactly what we're going to do. Would you come and teach at Curtis? And I thought, I can't believe that. If that isn't the clearest validation of our need to move, I don't know what is. You know? I don't know anyone at Curtis. It was so random. So here I am at Curtis doing this, working with students, coaching, and talking about fibers, you know, building blocks of music. Now I took you through that journey to help you to understand. You see, the purpose I have come to realize, my purpose, is not simply to educate. It is to free my students from what I call self-idolatry. Do you understand what that means? Self-idolatry. What does that mean? It's the traps of worrying about how you play, how people perceive you, how great or not great you think you are. I want them to be passionate about the craft that they've been given, the talent that they've been given, and to pursue it for the love of it. Do you understand what I'm saying? But not because it somehow extols who they are and their greatness. And the other half of this is this. I would like to free them from the idolatry of teacher as well. You see, I grew up in a culture, and some of you may or may not be, familiar with this, but in music, this whole intense apprenticeship situation of being taught by a private teacher induces idolatry. We worship our teachers. We'll do anything to get the praise and the adulation, acceptance of our teachers. And guess what? And I'm prone to this as well as a teacher. We love that, right? I know I'm something, and you just validated that. Right? Okay. Now, but is that really the best interest of the student? Not really. So I feel like by empowering students in what music is made of, getting their imagination and intellect to draw to the essence of the music making, empowers them to be independent individual entrepreneurs of music, right? So a combination of freeing them from idolatry of self and more towards the passion and pursuit of music from love, and to free them from the idolatry of teacher. Okay? Now, all that to say is, I'm a work in progress. I continue on this journey, but I delight in this one fact, that I know the creator of the universe is also the creator of my talent. And I am freed knowing that when I play, whether it's a moment of hardship or a moment of great success, what matters is my willingness to recognize his craftsmanship in me. Okay? And I delight in that. So I look forward to see what God will continue to do through my life in music. It may suddenly come short, and terminate. I may get in a car accident and no longer be able to play. And if that's the case, so be it. But my soul is freed by the knowledge that I have been bought through the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. My life's value and purpose transcends the craft and artistry of music. Right? And so my encouragement, my exhortation to you is this. Even though you have those mountaintop experiences as musicians where you say, man, this music is so mind-blowingly beautiful. It is so great. Know that there's an even higher mountain, transcendent mountain, waiting for you if you do not know your Creator. And it is this, the experience of playing your music for the God of the universe who created your talent. And there is nothing more transcendent, nothing more fulfilling, nothing more moving than coming to that point of recognition. That when you play, you delight the ultimate craftsmanship, the one who created. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you for coming. I'll repeat questions so that everybody can hear them.
Don't be shy.
No questions, none. That's not fair, guys. I just talked for how long? Right? We have to. What did I have for lunch? What time did I leave Philadelphia?
Any questions?
Yes.
Can you tell us more about how you chose Jesus Christ as your God? How you chose simply an abstract form or perhaps the God?
I think the distinctive of Jesus Christ that was clearly etched in my mind was that my salvation was not dependent upon anything that I did. And one thing I did realize is that many religions is about effort or doing or winning or earning salvation. And Christianity, through the message of the gospel, is the only one that says, no, it's not by what you earn, because all have fallen, all are sinners, but it's by the grace, by the gift of God, of Christ being sent to die on the cross. Now, I want to tell you this just because we're coming off the Passover Easter season. This profound realization, and I have been sharing this with friends who are very familiar with Judaism, that the Passover event, when Jews would put blood over their doorway, so when the spirit of death, because God said to the Jews as they were leaving Egypt and heading towards Canaan, He said, make sure you put the blood of a firstborn lamb, on the doorway, and all who are in that household will be spared. As the spirit of death comes over, of course, the Egyptian firstborns were all killed, correct? And all those who were saved were those who were in that household, under that roof, of course, with the doorway that had the blood. Now fast forward 2,000 years or so to Jesus Christ, right, and His death. He was the Lamb of God, the Lamb who died on the cross. And the same blood that protected the Jews in Passover and all those in that household is the same blood that was then sacrificed and offered for all of humanity. It was a gift. It was a promise and a deliverance that could only be given through grace. So that is my answer to your question. That was the distinctive of Christ. Anyone else? Yes.
I feel like you were mentioning when you performing for God's glory and like winning a competition if I was losing one. I feel like sometimes when I perform, if I feel like I perform really badly, I come to God and I'm like, well, how did that glorify you, you know? So I guess, how did you find the connection there?
You know, that's an excellent question. And there were many times where I thought after, you know, I'd have a poor performance, I'd come off stage, what went wrong? I did my best. And I'd go back to the drawing board and talk about, rethink like how I memorize things or how I practice things technically or whatever. And what I came to realize was that my job was to do my best running up to the performance, but that the act of faith for me was stepping on that stage and completely letting go, with the knowledge that whatever resulted would be, that it was God's. I had done my part. That's all I had to do. And I'd done my best. I wasn't frivolous and wasting my time watching, you know, Wheel of Fortune or whatever, right? But I had put my nose to the grindstone, but then I let go. And it was that symbolic act of letting go that made me realize, wow, it's only when I let go that I can really play my best. But how do you get yourself to let go if you don't recognize someone who's greater than yourself? If you're always trapped within the confines of controlling it yourself, you will never play as well as you can. Does that make any sense to you? So I tell my students, you prepare like everything depends on you. And when you get on that stage, you tell yourself, nothing depends on you. Right? You have to let it go. Because it's your maker who has brought you to that moment in time. And the other thing I realized is, guess what? The results don't even matter. You know? The results don't even matter. Let me tell you, I have earned opportunities to play with major orchestras when I thought, boy, I really didn't deserve it. I did not play my best. And all of a sudden, you've been chosen to play with the National Symphony. What? I didn't earn that. I didn't even deserve it, right? But guess what? It wasn't about me deserving it. It was about me holding plans of life and destiny loosely in my hands and saying, God, you do with this. You build from this what you know. That is the act of glorification God seeks. Any other questions? How many of you are undergraduates? Any graduate students in English? Do you ever ask yourself, why am I in music? Do you toil? Yeah.
Well, I'm sort of not anymore, but yes.
Yeah.
That was a major question of my life. Now that I'm not in music.
Yeah, and you know what? That you should be asking yourself that question. Not just because of the realities of the music world, but for a much larger existential question, right? And what is the purpose of my life? But let me just tell you this. One of the things I came to realize is that the less I controlled, the more God revealed His control in my life. And I wanted to share with you a personal anecdote. There was a time when I was 4 months pregnant with my husband and I, first child, our first child, and I was playing for auditioning for the top person at IMG. Do you know IMG is? It's a management company, international company. And I entered that situation profoundly ambivalent. Okay? In other words, everyone, everything, every cell in my body would say, man, you gotta go for this and you gotta get it, right? I mean, after all, how many opportunities like that come along in life? And it was there, I was sitting there, ready to play, but I thought, I'm expecting. And all I wanna do is be at home with my firstborn. That's the desire of my heart. And I know that was how, God was informing my own heart of what would be best. And so, that was one example. There was another management audition. And I'll tell you this, because God knew that I would never be able to let go of an opportunity like that, He closed the door on those opportunities. Something that in some ways should have been a natural thing to happen, this management progression. He closed the doors, and I remember I was expecting my second child and auditioning for another management company. I was like 8 months pregnant. I come out on stage, and this major manager says, after the audition, it was like 5, 6 managers who she says, let's have tea. And I went, she goes, how are you going to do this? You're going to have 2 kids. Do you really want this? And I was like, whoa, is it written all over my forehead? I don't want it. I want to stay home and I want to be with my kids. But then I thought, this is so antithetical to my training, to everything I've been taught. You know, there are a million pianists standing behind me saying, get out of the way, baby, it's my turn, right? And I was sitting, how could I think this way? I should have been in it full force. But guess what? I went through about 8 years of not playing that active, okay, between the years of 2004 up to, no, I should say about 7 years, 2011, right? Because by then I had 3 kids, and I finally made the decision that I was going to step down from management and just let happen whatever happens. That's tough, because guess what? The phone calls stop coming in, right? Because your manager tells you, you're free on October 12th, look, they want to have Beethoven triple at such and such, you'll fly out this day, right? Okay, guess what? No more phone calls, right? And I let go. And I thought, this is totally against any logical reasoning, but I do feel I'm being called to this, to be true to my calling as a mother. And then, that's when, it was during that time I was asked to teach these classes by my chairman. That was the time when I started learning and relearning and investing in this repository of knowledge and understanding, okay, to continue to enrich it. That moment of letting go has now come to a different stage, season in my life, and all of a sudden I'm getting calls, hi, will you play at this Beethoven Festival in Korea, or will you come out to Los Angeles and play this recital, or can you record the Brahms piano? Okay, so all these things are starting to come about, and I'm thinking, see, it's the act of letting go and relinquishing, knowing that your Lord is in charge. He will reward that, and it's now coming back full circle. I feel the very thing I gave away is the very thing that He's bringing back to me. But now at a stage of life when my kids are much younger, they're 16, 13, 10, and 7. Okay? So I just wanted to leave you with that encouragement. The narrative of your life is constructed over a very long time span. And what seems completely illogical to you at that moment, in your act of faith and submission, He will reward it and reveal the purpose behind that act of submission to you. And reward you. The harvest will be great. Okay? One of the callings I feel profoundly now, I drove 7 hours from Philadelphia to be with you guys. Guess what? And then tomorrow I have to drive back right away, because I have to teach at Curtis tomorrow morning. Now, why did I do this? If this were a concert, I probably would have said no. I'll be very honest with you. No, I can't do it. It's just too jam-packed. But because I'm with you, and I have this chance to encourage you in your faith, and to share very honestly from my heart the truth of Christ in my life, I can. And I feel like He's calling me to this more and more and more. Nothing goes wasted, you understand? So this is, I think, the beginnings of another kind of performance journey, encouraging faith and discipline.
Thank you so much.
For more information about the Veritas Forum, including additional recordings and a calendar of upcoming events, please visit our website at veritas.org.